8 mirrors from a single drop, 6-link farming aka divine farming, beyond monsters everywhere juicing maps like crazy, divines replacing exiles, the economy flipped upside down, Archnemesis loot goblins, the wildest loot explosions, and much more. Get ready to dive into the incredible journey of Magic Find throughout Path of Exile's history. As always, let's start from the very beginning. Magic Find, a mechanic that divides the Path of Exile community like no other. Some players want it gone forever, calling it a crutch that ruins the game. Others see it as the heart and soul of the grind and essential part of what makes PoE unique. This is the story of Magic Find's rise, dominance, and eventual fall across 12 years of Path of Exile, from its earliest leaks in 2013 through its golden era and into the dawn of Path of Exile 2, whose Magic Find history is still being written before our very eyes. But is this truly the end of Magic Find or simply its transformation into something new? A new era, perhaps just beginning to unfold? In this video, we'll dive deep into the evolution of Magic Find and best farming strategies in Path of Exile, from league to league. I'll show you the key items that defined its power, how they were buffed, nerfed or even removed, and how those changes shaped the farming meta over time. But that's only part of the story. We'll also see how the game itself evolved, how new systems, juicing, map content and game pacing reshaped what it meant to farm efficiently. Through every patch and mechanic, we'll follow how players adapted, optimized and outsmarted the game to stay ahead of the curve. Whether you're curious about the systems behind Magic Find or want to understand why it's remained one of the game's most polarizing topics, this video will cover it all. The first spark. Before the official release of Path of Exile during the open beta phase in June 2013, two challenge leagues were introduced, Anarchy and Onslaught, released with patch 0.11. Anarchy, the standard league, brought rock exiles into the game, powerful, unpredictable enemies that mimicked player builds and could drop decent loot. Meanwhile, Onslaught was the hardcore counterpart, where all monsters had 20% increased attack, cast and movement speed, creating a much more dangerous experience for skilled players. At this stage, Magic Find as a concept hadn't truly emerged yet. There were no unique items that boosted item quantity or rarity, with one technical exception. Thief's Torment, a unique ring introduced before these leaks, was theoretically the only unique item featuring item quantity, but with its drop disabled during Anarchy and Onslaught, it was, for all practical purposes, non-existent. The only source of quantity was a random affix on rare gear, granting from 15 to 20% increased item quantity. It was possible to obtain on helmets, gloves, boots, rings and amulets. In many ways, both of the game and the idea of magic finding were still in their infancy. But the foundation was quietly being laid. Rock exiles, item affixes and early hardcore risk-reward systems were already hinting at what was to come. Fun fact, patch 0.11 also introduced the Eternal Orb, a currency item that wasn't particularly valuable at the time, but since its discontinuation years ago, it has become the single most expensive currency in the game, now worth nearly 3 mirror of Calandra. So if you happened to play back then and still have a few lying in your stash, congratulations, you're rich. The official beginning, where Magic Find was truly born. October 2013 marked a pivotal moment in Path of Exile's history. The game's official release with patch 1.0, introducing the Domination and Nemesis challenge leagues. And it wasn't just the game launching, this was also the moment where Magic Find truly began. Domination brought shrines into the game and Nemesis added Nemesis modded rare monsters. But more importantly, it introduced one of the most iconic items in Path of Exile history, the Headhunter unique leather belt. While Headhunter doesn't directly provide item quantity or item rarity, it's impossible to talk about MF without it. Why? Because Magic Find builds are inherently weaker than standard DPS or tank builds, and Headhunter gave them the power spike they desperately needed to survive and thrive on heavily juiced maps. From this point on, it became a cornerstone of nearly every high-end MF setup. This patch also introduced the Item Quantity Support Gem, which increased item quantity by up to 43%, and the Item Rarity Support Gem offering up to 69% rarity. These two gems, especially the Item Quantity one, became foundational tools for any MF-focused character. The item quantity gem turned out to be so strong that it had been removed just 1 league later in patch 1.1. Even though there wasn't any real map juicing system yet and no clearly defined MF farming strategy, the gear to support Magic Find was already being assembled. This leak marked the debut of several iconic Magic Find related unique items. Let's take a closer look at what was introduced. Goldworm unique boots. While some players debated whether rare boots with 20% quantity and stronger affixes were better, at this point in time Goldworm was often the superior choice. Later, when rare items became more powerful, that changed, but back in 1.0, Goldworms were iconic. Sadima's Touch unique gloves. While many players initially preferred rare gloves with the now legacy 20% quantity mod, Sadima's Touch became the budget go-to and eventually best in slot, especially after patch 2.0 removed quant mods from rare gloves entirely. Fun fact, Sadima is an anagram of Midas, a reference to the mythical king whose touch turned everything into gold. The Thief's Torment unique ring, technically introduced in this era but rarely used due to its occupying both ring slots, too restrictive for serious MF setups. Rat's Nest unique helmet only provided 25% item rarity but became widely popular in both Magic Find and regular builds due to its movement speed, crit chance, power and style. It wasn't best in slot for quantity, but it became a fan favorite. Overseas unique gloves up to 50% item rarity, not best in slot for MF, but commonly used especially in early days when rarity focused items were still being explored. This patch laid the groundwork for what would become a decade-long evolution of Magic Find. While there were no Scarabs, Sextants or Delirium orbs, there was still a sense of discovery. Players were experimenting, theory crafting and slowly realizing just how powerful MF could become. This is where it all started, the birth of Magic Find culture in Path of Exile. The rise of Strongboxes and the Bow MF era begins. In March 2014, patch 1.1 marked a major step forward for Path of Exile, introducing the Ambush and Invasion challenge leagues, alongside the first major mini-expansion, Sacrifice of the Val. Ambush introduced Strongboxes, a mechanic that would go on to play a crucial role in several Magic Find metas throughout the years. While technically the loot from the Strongboxes themselves wasn't directly scaled by the player's item quantity or rarity, only the monsters inside were, the potential rewards were so high that Strongbox farming quickly became a common choice even among MF builds. This strategy would truly come into its own in future leagues once players gained tools to reliably juice, target and chain Strongboxes, eventually becoming one of the popular mechanics in Magic Find landscape. In contrast, Invasion focused on dangerous monsters invading maps, never really found its place in the farming meta. It added some challenge and variety, but not much in terms of value for MF players. Sacrifice of the Val brought the Queen of the Atziri endgame boss and Val orbs, allowing players to corrupt items for powerful outcomes. However, from a Magic Find perspective, these additions had a little to no direct impact. This patch introduced several key items, including one that arguably defined the entire Magic Find scene for years to come: Wind Reaper. This legendary Wind Reaper unique bow was the best in-slot MF weapon for years. Wind Reaper grants item quantity and rarity conditionally on cold and lightning crit kills, making it a natural fit for fast-paced MF bow builds. The downside? It funneled almost all MF builds into bow builds, limiting diversity for years. As PoE's difficulty increased in later expansions, many players moved to rare bows for higher damage, but for a long time, Wind Reaper was absolutely dominant. From this point onward, the bow was not just a weapon, it was a badge of every serious Magic Finder. Queen of the Forest, unique body armor. While not a Magic Find item by itself, Queen of the Forest became an iconic part of many MF builds. Back when movement speed scaling was more limited, this chest piece allowed MF characters, who are typically squishy, to maintain high clear speed. It became a nostalgic symbol of early era MF setups. Divination Distillate. This unique flask granted increased item quantity, item rarity, and a bonus to maximum elemental resistances. However, because it was a hybrid flask, its uptime was notoriously difficult to maintain, which kept it from seeing widespread use early on. Still, in later leagues, when new mechanics allowed players to extend its duration more easily, it slowly gained popularity and found its place in certain MF setups. Sadima's Touch unique gloves. The 24% item quantity on a single item slot, gloves, was reduced to 16%. This league didn't yet introduce juicing strategies for advanced MF farming loops, but it firmly established the foundations. From now on, MF wasn't just a gimmick, it was becoming a meta. The game changer. In August 2014, patch 1.2 brought us to new challenge leagues, Rampage and Beyond, alongside the Forsaken Masters mini expansion. While the introduction of Masters didn't directly impact the MF meta, what happened in this league absolutely did. Rampage, the standard league, offered stacking kill streaks buffs within a 5-second window, fun to play but not really relevant for Magic Find. Beyond, however, that changed everything. This league introduced what many consider to be the single most influential mechanic in the history of Magic Find. When players killed monsters close together, deadly Beyond demons would spawn, rare, unique, and explosively rewarding. These encounters became the heart of juice map farming. The loot potential was so high that if a map didn't have Beyond, I simply didn't run it. That's how central it became to MF. Beyond was eventually removed and replaced by the Scourge mechanic in 2021, but for many years it was an essential part of any serious farming strategy. It synergized with almost every other system in the game and pushed Magic Find efficiency to new heights. This patch also introduced Zana, a new master who allowed players to add modifiers to maps using the map device, further paving the way for controlled strategic farming. As for gear, one notable addition was Centauri's Answer, a unique shield offering up to 8% item quantity. Unfortunately, it never gained real popularity among non-bow MF builds. The power of rare items simply outclassed it. To sum it up, 1.2 marked a true turning point. It wasn't just another league, it was a shift in mindset. Suddenly, MF wasn't just about gear, it was about mechanics. And with each league, those mechanics became more refined, more complex, and more rewarding. The real MF journey had only just begun. The first farming strategy. In December 2014, Path of Exile launched the Torment and Bloodlines leagues with patch 1.3. Torment was the standard league, while Bloodlines served as its hardcore counterpart. Torment introduced tormented spirits which would flee from the player, possessing nearby enemies and greatly increasing their loot upon death. While initially as a quirky league mechanic, players quickly discovered a clever strategy, using Empire's Grasp gloves with reversed knockback to vacuum monsters directly into the spirit's path. This way many enemies could be possessed at once, dramatically boosting their rewards. This method, dubbed vacuum farming, became the first widely recognized farming strategy, one that manipulated game mechanics for maximum profit. Though effective, the approach was slow and eventually fell out of favor as spirit rewards were nerfed. Still, it marked a turning point. Magic Find would no longer be just about gear, it became about strategy. Bloodlines, on the other hand, added new mods to monster packs, increasing difficulty but not contributing to MF in any meaningful way. Now let's look at a new Magic Find item introduced this league. Greed's Embrace, a unique golden plate with both item quantity and rarity was introduced. Despite its tempting stats, its low armor and harsh movement penalty made it an unpopular choice. A few extreme min-maxers used it, sacrificing clear speed for more drops, but for most players it simply wasn't worth it. Most MF players stuck with previously mentioned options like Queen of the Forest or rare chests with better mobility and survivability. In future leagues, the rise of rare items with built-in item rarity support gave players even more flexibility. Patch 1.3 was pivotal not because of game-breaking loot or items, but because it marked the birth of strategic farming. Magic Find evolved from simple stat stacking into something more creative, outsmarting the system itself. MF starts to evolve. The Awakening wasn't just the name of the expansion, it was the moment Magic Find truly began to mature. A new era of strategy, purpose, and optimization had arrived. In July 2015, patch 2.0 launched alongside the Awakening expansion, introducing the Warbands and Tempest challenge leagues. Warbands, the standard league, added faction-based enemy groups to maps. Visually distinct and lore-rich, they added flavor, but for Magic Find they didn't move the needle. Tempest, the hardcore counterpart, was far more intriguing. Corrupting Tempest could corrupt all items within their radius or when a player was affected by them. In theory, this meant you could land 6 links from random corrupted items. which could then be vendored for divine orbs. While the mechanic wasn't particularly profitable at the time, its potential would later be unlocked throughout the prophecy system introduced in a future league, but I'll save that story for later. Just know this, with the right legacy gear I once managed to drop 69 sixlings from a single map. Yes, 69. But none of that compares to real game changer, the Awakening expansion itself. This patch introduced divination cards, which could be exchanged for specific items and currency. For Magic Finders, it was revolutionary. Suddenly, farming wasn't just about bulk, it became targeted. You could run a map not for general loot, but for one specific card that could drop something like a Headhunter, a Mirror, or a Tabula Rasa. Div cards farming quickly became one of the most profitable MF strategies in the game. This patch also gave rise to a philosophical split among MF players. Quantity farming, maximizing item quantity to chase raw currency drops and div cards, and rarity farming, combining quantity with rarity to target unique items, especially those with high value. There was also a magic find item introduced this league, Venturous Gamble, a unique ring with randomized item quantity, rarity and resistances, with rolls ranging from negative to positive values. Fun fact, a perfect Vendor's Gamble has likely never existed. Statistically, it's thousands of times harder to hit than winning the lottery. This patch also saw the nerf of Wind Reaper, the classic MF bow, dropping from 25% IIQ and 50% IIR to 15% and 30%. This era also saw the removal of Eternal Orbs, a huge shift in the overall game economy, though with minimal direct impact on MF. Another massive change, the removal of the 15 to 20% quantity affix from rare and magic gear. This effectively forced MF players to lean more heavily into unique MF items, reshaping gear priorities for years to come. In summary, patch 2.0 marked the moment Magic Find grew up. It became deeper, more sophisticated and more fun. With div cards and item quantity shifts, players began thinking differently, embracing long-term farming strategies and adapting to a game that was quickly evolving. It was no longer just about stacking IIQ and IIR, it was about mastering the system. Maintaining the grind. Not every single league reshaped the meta, and this one barely stirred the waters. In December 2015, the Talisman League launched with patch 2.1. Talismans were amulets that could be upgraded throughout rituals, often offering strong modifiers. But they didn't impact magic find or farming strategies in any meaningful way. There were no major changes to MF gear, item balance or core farming mechanics during this time. For most magic finders, it was business as usual, waiting for the next innovation to arrive. The calm before the spark. Not every addition changes the game overnight. The Perandus League brought Kadiro, a vendor, but in terms of magic finding, his impact was minimal. The real headline was the introduction of Ascendancy classes, a system that let players specialize their characters more deeply. For MF builds, Deadeye quickly rose to popularity thanks to its synergy with projectiles and speed, two pillars of fast and efficient farming. There was one notable nerf. Divination Distillate, one of the staple MF flasks, had its maximum resistance bonus reduced from 6% to 4%. Perandus didn't revolutionize loot strategies, but the groundwork was being laid. Destiny and the birth of juicing. With the Prophecy League, loot started to become personal. For the first time, players could socket prophecies into their character, which would trigger in future maps, often altering enemy types, adding content, or unlocking special rewards. While you couldn't fully control if or when a prophecy would activate, it added a layer of anticipation and early forms of map customization. This was the moment that map juicing, the practice of stacking extra content into a map, quietly began. Some prophecies even launched full-blown farming metas. Valwinds added corrupting Tempest to maps, allowing items to drop corrupted. It slowed map clear speed, but the rewards were massive if done right. Personal note, I once dropped 69 sixlings in a single map on Standard, which I already mentioned, with Legacy MF gear using this. Full video is in the description if you want to see it. And the next prophecy strategy, Monstrous Treasure, replaced all monsters with Strongboxes, creating maps overflowing with loot. Prophecy didn't just add flavor, it set the stage for deeper, player-driven loot engineering that would define future leagues. The Atlas Awakens, Sextants and the Rise of Map Control. At first glance, Essence looked like another moderate league. Captured monsters frozen in crystals, dropped currency used for crafting. Useful but not game-changing for MF. But this patch introduced something much bigger, the Atlas of Worlds. It was the birth of the modern mapping system, and with it came Sextants, a new currency that allowed players to roll map modifiers across areas of the Atlas. These mods consumed charges when a map was opened, and players quickly learned how to abuse them. This led to sextant blocking, stacking unwanted sextants in certain regions to prevent them from appearing in others, increasing the chances of rolling the desirable ones. There were many powerful sextants that allowed players to use their maps in different ways, but two of them stood out and quickly became favorites among magic finders. One added a chance for monsters to drop corrupted items, which meant a higher chance of naturally dropped sixlings, a rare and valuable loot type. The other granted a chance for maps to spawn beyond monsters, which dramatically increased monster density, making maps far more profitable. When combined, these sextants created a synergy that not only boosted drop rates but also made maps feel more explosive and chaotic, exactly what MF players thrived on. This combo laid the foundation for what would later become known as Beyond plus Corrupted farming, one of the early examples of high investment, high reward juicing strategies that would define the golden era of magic finding. Juicing had evolved. Players now had agency over how profitable their maps could be. By combining sextants, strong MF gear and high clear speed builds, they began to reach unprecedented loot levels. Prophecies were added to the core game, stacking yet another layer on top of juicing. And then came the Guardians of the Void, the first real endgame bosses of the Atlas, whose fragment drops launched entirely new farming routes. Chaos in motion. Breach was one of the most explosive leaks in PoE history, and a turning point for MF gameplay. Opening a breach created a fast-moving, expanding circle of enemies, scaling in difficulty and loot the longer you kept in open. Combined with mechanics like Beyond, it created massive packs of monsters, perfect for high-speed clearing and loot multiplication. Some players avoided breaches, they were chaotic and slowed down the flow, but for serious farmers they became essential profit engines. This was peak density farming before it became standardized. If you could keep up, the loot was absurd. The Loot Renaissance. The Legacy League was exactly what it sounded like, a celebration of the past and a treasure trove for magic finders. Players could equip League Stones, which guaranteed that League mechanics from the past would appear in upcoming maps. This was a direct upgrade from Prophecies. The effects were 100% guaranteed and could be stacked for wild results. Players could discover ancient reliquary keys, which when opened, granted a random unique item from the past, rolled with the coveted legacy stats and adorned with a distinctive visual foil effect, clearly making the item as a true relic. This mechanic created an unprecedented sense of excitement and FOMO, as players had the chance to obtain rare legacy items featuring powerful mods no longer available in the current game, making every reliquary key opening a moment filled with anticipation and nostalgia. Legacy also introduced some of the most iconic MF items in PoE history. Viscose Collar, an incredibly powerful amulet that boosted both item quantity and rarity, it was eventually nerfed and removed from the drop pool entirely. Fun fact, the amulet is shaped like a dog's head, a tribute to its creator Scourge, Bisco. And Bisco's Leash, a belt that added item quantity and scaling rarity from Rampage stacks. Legacy didn't just revive old content, it handed players the ultimate MF sandbox and they made the most of it. A shard of a revolution. The Harbinger League marked a big patch number 3.0 and an even bigger expansion, the Fall of Oriath. Yet for magic finders it was more of a quiet shift than a dramatic transformation. Harbingers themselves brought a new system, currency shards, which eventually became a staple in loot pools. The idea of enemies dropping fractional pieces of valuable orbs was intriguing and it added another layer of loot-based strategies. But while Oriath fell, the MF meta held steady. Most of the new content wasn't directly impactful for loot-focused players, but it helped lay foundations for future farming systems. Echoes below the surface. At launch, Abyss wasn't seen as a loot-driven mechanic, but from patch 3.17 onward, it evolved into a key farming strategy for a limited time, becoming a crucial approach during that period before the meta shifted again. The Abyss system added cracks in the ground that spawned waves of enemies with potential access to abyssal depths and unique stockable jewels. While the loot wasn't mind-blowing yet, the monster density was already hinting at MF synergy. More importantly, the War for the Atlas expansion introduced the Elder and his influence system. MF players discovered influence flipping, altering maps to keep Elder's presence in a specific region for big loot boosts. The strategy required micromanagement and planning, but became an advanced tool for farming efficiency. Taming the Wild for profit. Bestiary was an ambitious league. Players could capture beasts and craft powerful items by sacrificing them. While the mechanic itself didn't define the MF meta, beast farming emerged as a niche but lucrative strategy. Those who mastered it found themselves raking in profit even without traditional MF gear. This league also marked the beginning of a trend, nerfing legacy MF gear. The once powerful Bisco Scholar amulet was reduced from a range of 50 to 100% quantity on normal enemies to just 35% to 50%. The days of passive quantity stacking were slowly coming to an end, and the era of active juicing was gradually emerging. Temples of Profit. Incursion changed how maps could explode with loot. Literally. The League introduced the Temple of Atzoatl, built through a series of short incursions that player triggered during maps. While the temple itself had decent loot, the real win came from incursion rooms spawning directly in maps, which were affected by the map modifiers, adding another layer of challenge and reward. These rooms quickly became part of nearly every juicing farming strategy. Their monster density and reward potential led to some of the biggest loot explosions ever seen in mapping at the time. MF builds that could clear fast and survive the chaos reigned supreme. Depth over quantity. With Delve, loot went underground. Literally. Instead of regular mapping, players navigated through a procedurally generated mine powered by sulfite. While traditional MF gear wasn't necessary, Delve introduced deterministic farming on a new level. This league birthed a new archetype, Delve Runners, builds made specifically to speedrun the mine and harvest fossils, resonators, and hidden chests. MF gear took a backseat here, but the concept of structured high-reward content stuck around and would influence the design of future leagues. Fun fact, the idea of Delve resembles the World Atlas system introduced years later in PoE 2, a spiritual ancestor, perhaps. Scarabs, the rise of strategic map juicing. The Betrayal mechanic itself, involving the Immortal Syndicate and its internal politics, didn't catch on the MF circles, but patch 3.5 introduced a far more important feature for loot strategists, Scarabs. Scarabs were modifiers that could be slotted into the map device to guarantee or enhance certain mechanics. This became another core layer of juicing. For the first time, players could directly and reliably add Breach, Abyss or other mechanics into their maps. The result was customizable density and profits. The catch? Scarabs were expensive. Only the wealthiest players could afford full setups, but the return on investment was massive. At the same time, the nerf wave continued. Sadima's touch gloves were hit, lowering their item quantity bonus from 12 to 16% to just 5 to 10%. Juicing was rising, but raw MF gear was slowly being tuned down. Where strategy meets crafting. Synthesis was ambitious and experimental, not a typical MF league, but one that many players found unique and enjoyable. Its focus on crafting and memory fragments tied loot heavily to planning and deterministic rewards rather than sheer quantity or drop rate farming. While it offered powerful items for min-maxers and crafters, it didn't deliver the density or burst loot that MF builds relied on. It was a league beloved by theory crafters and strategists, but less impactful for the core Magic Find meta. Battlefields of Loot, the Legion era. Now, this was a league for Magic Finders. Legion added monoliths to maps, spawning armies of frozen enemies that could be unlocked and slaughtered within seconds. The reward? Absolute chaos, with unique items, currency drops, etc. The mechanic became a part of many farming strategies, and Legion Scarabs would become some of the sought after in future metas. Also added in patch 3.7, the 5th slot on the map device, allowing for even more complex juicing setups. That one extra slot may not seem like much, but it opened up a world of possibilities for players trying to push farming efficiency to the limit. A different kind of wealth. Blight maps were a huge departure from standard gameplay, more like tower defense than mapping. These maps were filled with loot, but the profit came from chests at the end, not monsters killed. That meant MF stats had minimal effect and players optimized for clear efficiency and reward node targeting instead. Still, blighted maps became a valuable currency source, often farmed en masse and sold to players who enjoyed the style or didn't mind standing still for 10 minutes per map. Not every profitable system favors MF, and Blight was proof of that. Socketing power into the Atlas. In December 2019, the Metamorph League launched with patch 3.9 alongside the Conquerors of the Atlas expansion, a major shift in endgame progression. While the Metamorph mechanic itself didn't become a key part of Magic Find metas, the real game changer was the introduction of socketable Watchstones, which completely revamped the Atlas. Players could now modify map regions by socketing Watchstones, increasing monster levels, pack size, map tier, and more. More importantly, unique Watchstones became a sought-after component of advanced farming strategies. Some of these added huge bonuses to specific mechanics, making them a powerful layer of map juicing. This expansion pushed the complexity and customizability of farming even further, reinforcing the idea that preparation was just as important as execution. The rise of Delirium farming. Patch 3.10 changed everything. With the launch of the Delirium League in March 2020, Delirious maps became the most profitable and most dangerous content for Magic Finders. Delirium Orbs introduced a scalable map mechanic. The more orbs you used, the harder and richer the map became. These fog-covered maps dramatically increased monster density and loot drops, but they pushed characters to their limits. For the first time, decent builds with raw IAQ and IIR weren't enough. Survivability, clear speed, and AoE became just as important. Delirium also introduced Simulacrum Splinters, which could be combined into full Simulacrums, a new high-end farming activity. This added 3 new farming layers: Delirium Orb Farming, Delirium Mapping, and Simulacrum Running. Each layer had its own meta and economy, and players often rotated between them for maximum profit. Delirium wasn't just a mechanic, it became a long-term pillar of PoE's MF endgame. A Crafter's Paradise. June 2020 brought the Harvest League and patch 3.11. Like Synthesis before, Harvest was a crafting league first, and didn't shake up the Magic Find meta significantly. While the Harvest monsters did drop loot, they weren't part of the traditional juicing strategies. Instead, the powerful crafting bench inside the Sacred Grove enabled meta-defining gear crafting, but not necessarily for MF builds. This league was a briefer for Magic Finders, a time to upgrade gear rather than chase quantity. It's worth noting that initially, Harvest Life Force was not itemized. Players had to use their crafts immediately without the option to save, trade, or stockpile them too much. However, in later leagues, Life Force became itemized and fully tradable, which transformed Harvest into a profitable and targetable farming strategy. This change opened the door for many players to specialize in Harvest farming either for their own crafts or for pure profit. The coin shower that wasn't. The Heist League arrived with patch 3.12. While the mechanic introduced rogue companions, contracts, and blueprint heists, it didn't meaningfully impact MF strategies. Most of the loot came from chests, not monsters, which meant MF stats had little influence. However, the odd addition stood out: the anomalous increased rarity support gem. It claimed to grant 2% chance for a coin shower on kill, but no one knew what it did. Some players thought it was bugged, some hoped for secret currency mechanics, and others assumed it was just a visual effect replacing the actual additional rarity bonus from quality. To this day, it remains one of the GGG's more mysterious and trollish additions to the MF ecosystem. Atlas Tree roots begin to grow. Ritual League launched in January 2021 alongside the Echoes of the Atlas expansion, a monumental moment for the Atlas system. While rituals themselves were rewarding, they didn't require MF builds and weren't very scalable with map juicing. But the expansion introduced several massive updates for endgame farming. Atlas passive trees, allowing players to specialize in specific mechanics for region, craftable Watchstones, adding flexibility to map scaling, and elevated Sextants, the highest tier of Sextants for elite level juicing. The passive trees created specialization and identity for farmers. You could now build your endgame around Legion, Breach, Delirium, etc. and amplify their rewards through passives. This patch marked the beginning of what would later be called the Golden Age of Magic Finding, a multi-league era where player agency, power and strategy and level of rewards hit all-time highs. The Circle, the Grind, the Exploit. The Ultimatum League arrived in April 2021. The mechanic revolved around standing in a circle and defeating waves of enemies. The longer you survived, the greater the reward. While fun and intense, Ultimatum didn't scale well with Magic Find, nor with juicing. The encounters were time-consuming and stationary and didn't benefit much from IAQ and IIR. As a result, they were skipped by most MF players. A notable moment from this league was an exploit that allowed players to stop the encounter timer, which in turn let the game spawn massive amounts of monsters, resulting in huge loot explosions. Even some high-profile streamers like Empyrean were banned for a league after abusing this despite reporting the issue. A rare moment where the game simply invited players to push its limits. Nerfs and new merchants. In July 2021, the Expedition League launched, bringing with it a team of NPC vendors and a new mechanic focused on unearthing ancient artifacts and trading them. Expedition zones were a decent side activity, adding extra loot and map density, but they didn't become a primary MF strategy. Most drops came from chests rather than monster kills, so Magic Find gear had little effect. Worse yet, patch 3.15 brought another nerf to Divination Distillate. The flask's bonuses were reduced from 40 to 60% IIR to 20 to 30%, and from 12 to 18% IIQ to 8 to 12%, making it much less impactful. However, this patch could have been seen as unfavorable for Magic Find players, if not for the addition of the new utility flask, the Gold Flask. It brought a fresh way to boost item rarity and became a valuable tool in MF builds. Not only does it stack with existing rarity bonuses, but it can also be crafted with modifiers like movement speed, adding flexibility and making it a popular choice in the aftermath of the Divination Distillate nerf. The Age of Tainted Currency. Scourge League introduced a new mechanic, corrupting the entire map into a twisted dimension filled with stronger monsters and higher loot potential. This dimension dropped Tainted Currency, a new item class that let players modify corrupted gear. While not a direct MF mechanic, Scourge did increase profits for high-efficiency currency farmers. Some players found niche MF builds that could survive and scale loot in the corrupted dimension, though it wasn't part of mainstream juicing. Other changes included the number of Atlas regions was reduced to 4, preparing for bigger changes in 3.17, and Sacred Orbs were added, a new type of currency that changed the item defenses. Scourge felt like a transitional league, setting the stage for the massive overhaul that would follow. Loot Goblins and the death of Watchstones. With patch 3.17 came Archnemesis League, and more importantly, the Siege of the Atlas expansion. It marked one of the biggest changes to the endgame in PoE history. The Archnemesis mechanic introduced custom-crafted rare monsters using powerful modifiers. Some of these monsters' combos dropped so much loot that they earned the nickname Loot Goblins. To farm them efficiently, Players juiced their maps with abysses and additional projectiles mod, increasing the chances of creating multi-mod rare monsters. For the first time ever, item rarity became an important stat in a Magic Find build, used specifically to maximize loot from these rare mobs, as it was affecting the quantity of items from these drops. It was a short-lived but iconic moment in MF history, in terms of item rarity. Siege of the Atlas brought sweeping structural changes. Atlas regions were removed and replaced with a single massive passive tree. Surveyor's compasses were added, allowing Sextants mods to be traded and stored. Unique and craftable Watchstones were removed. Voidstones replaced Watchstones. They could be sextanted but didn't offer juicing modifiers. Prophecies were removed, ending another era of map augmentation. While the new Atlas tree offered amazing flexibility, the removal of Watchstones meant one major layer of juicing was gone. Combined with the reliance on random Archnemesis loot spikes, this patch left many MF players wondering, was the golden age of magic finding coming to an end? The calm before the loot storm. The Sentinel League introduced Sentinel devices, deployable constructs that empowered enemies and improved loot. Despite the mechanic's potential, it was mostly used for targeted crafting and specific farming setups and not widely adopted by MF players. Sentinel felt like a break from the chaos of Archnemesis. The League mechanics weren't dangerous enough or rewarding enough to build just MF strategies around, and IAQ and IR had minimal impact on empowered mobs. However, beneath the surface, GGG was preparing a major shift. The next league would deliver a game-changing loot system, one that would ignite controversy, revolutionize Magic Find, and trigger the most hated debates in PoE history. The end of the Golden Era. Old School Beyond, you were too powerful for this world, but we will never forget you. Patch 3.19 marked a turning point in the history of Magic Find. While the Lake of Kalandra itself, a customizable encounter map, had minimal effect on juicing strategies, the systemic changes to loot and mechanics shattered the foundation of the MF meta. Most notably, the Beyond mechanic was reworked. The classic Bandit Horde Beyond, famous for juicing farming and unprecedented monster density, was removed. It was replaced with Scourge-style demons, and while still challenging, the new mobs were fewer, slower, and dropped less loot. One of the most iconic MF tools in Path of Exile was silently buried. Even more dramatic was the change to the 6-link vendor recipe. Previously, vendoring a 6-link item yielded a divine orb, giving rise to the divine farming meta, where players run high-density maps with monsters drop corrupted items mod to hunt for 6-links. In 3.19, this recipe was changed to return only 20 orbs of fusing, ending the viability of 6-link farming overnight. This had a ripple effect on the entire in-game economy. Before this patch, Exalted Orbs were more valuable than Divines. All item pricing was based on Exalts. Dropping an Exalt was an exciting moment. After this patch, Divines became the main trading currency, surpassing Exalts. All mirror tier items were now priced in Divines. Exalts fell into relative obscurity. In short, the value of Divine and Exalted Orbs flipped, and the entire economy shifted with it. Other loot changes further alienated MF players. Unique item drop rates were reduced. High-end uniques became much rarer and harder to target farm. For the MF community, 3.19 felt like a direct attack. Beyond maps, gone. 6-link vendor currency, nerfed. Global loot quantity, reduced. The golden age of MF, the age of Beyond, 6-link farming, Watchstones, and old school juice had ended. Some would call the changes necessary, some would call them brutal, but one thing was certain: things would never be the same again. Skill over player quantity. The Forbidden Sanctum launched with patch 3.20, introducing a new roguelike dungeon system that was completely separate from mapping. The League mechanic didn't interact with juicing or Magic Find, but was so profitable that it overshadowed traditional farming methods entirely. Sanctum runs rewarded players with currency, relics and valuable items, and player skill, not IAQ and IIR, determined the profits. In a now legendary run, Cute Dog managed to earn 8 mirrors from a single Sanctum in a single drop, an unprecedented display of the league's reward potential. GGG also introduced the Fracturing Orb, which could be assembled from fracturing shards dropped by Harbingers. This made Harbinger content more attractive for mapping and became a key MF adjacent target for many farmers. This patch made GGG's design intentions clear. Magic Find should no longer be the only path to riches. Powerful builds and skilled play should be just as, or even more, rewarding. Forging the MF Holy Grail. In April 2023, Crucible League was introduced with patch 3.21. The league featured a weapon forging system where items could be leveled to unlock passive skill trees, dramatically altering the power level of gear. While the league mechanic didn't directly affect the MF mapping meta, it produced one of the most important Magic Find items in PoE history. Player Belton forged the most powerful MF bow ever created, named Loath Thunder, leveraging the Crucible passive tree system to stack damage, making it the holy grail of MF and other build types. This bow became the benchmark for MF builds, a mirrored item copied and used by nearly every high-end farmer, a symbol of how Crucible crafting could transcend leagues. While the core league didn't reward MF directly, its legacy is etched in the tools it left behind. Introduction of Tattoos, Omens and Hinekora Lock. Patch 3.22 brought with it the Trial of the Ancestors, a tactical auto-battler league mechanic that took place outside of maps. While engaging and rewarding, it didn't interact with Magic Find and most MF builds ignored it entirely. However, 3.22 added meaningful content for the MF economy. Hinekora's Lock, a rare and powerful currency that allowed players to predetermine crafting outcomes, it was expensive, valuable and best farmed with high MF setups in juiced maps. Atlas Keystone rework, 16 new keystones were added, reshaping farming strategies and enabling more refined control over loot, tattoos and omens. New drop types that added diversity to farming routes, though they didn't specially benefit from IAQ and IIR. While the league mechanic itself was siloed from traditional mapping, the currency ecosystem thrived. Players who understood how to juice maps still found profitable targets, and MF builds continued to adapt, if only on the edges. The most broken league in history. In December 2023, the Affliction League was launched, and it quickly became one of the most insane, over-the-top experiences for Magic Finders ever. It wasn't just profitable, it was historic. Players were reporting dozens of mirrors farmed. Even more shocking, many of them came from natural drops, rather than crafting or divine traits. For anyone familiar with Path of Exile's economy, that statement alone captures the scale of the Affliction meta. The culprit? Wildwood Wisps, the core league mechanic. Wisps infused monsters with incredible loot multipliers, and when combined with juiced maps, the result was a torrent of high-end loot. Mirrors, divine orbs, exalts, it all dropped in volumes never before seen. For Magic Finders, it was a golden harvest. For the economy, it was chaos. While the Wildwood mechanic was later nerfed, it marked a temporary return of loot-based wealth, a final high before a string of nerfs and reworks would reshape MF forever. Goodbye Sextants, hello Tier 17 maps. Necropolis, launched in March 2024, introduced a landmark change. Tier 17 maps, the most rewarding, difficult and risky maps in the game's history. These new maps came with massive loot multipliers to currency, scarabs and item quantity, new exclusive map mods, deadly, complex, frustrating and punishing, and with the new bosses with high drop potential but brutal mechanics. This created a paradox. Magic Find builds couldn't survive Tier 17s, but normal builds couldn't match their loot potential without investment. One of the best strategies involved Titanic and Torment scarabs to spawn plenty of possessed rogue exiles, resulting in endgame level challenge and profit. Another popular, slightly easier, yet still profitable strategy was strongbox farming. Farming tier 17s became the domain of elite players only, and it changed the MF formula completely. But there was more. 3 massive changes reshaped how Magic Finders approached mapping. Back to basics Atlas Keystone. This node removed all league mechanics from maps, but in return offered up to 80% increased effect of map explicit modifiers. Players combined this with scarab-based farming to create simple but wildly profitable fast mapping strategies. It was so effective that the node was removed in 3.25, as it completely dominated the meta. Scarab rework. Many old Sextant effects were migrated to scarabs, significantly raising their value. New scarabs, such as Titanic, Torment, and others, became key ingredients in profitable MF strategies. And Sextants removed. After years of being a core juicing tool, Sextants were fully removed. Their place in the loot ecosystem was taken by scarabs and keystones, shifting power to the Atlas passive tree and map crafting strategies. Necropolis didn't make MF builds stronger, but it changed the tools MF players had to work with. The focus shifted from micro-rolling Watchstones to macro-scaling scarabs and map layouts. Goodbye item quantity. The death of item quantity on gear. Settlers of Kalgur wasn't a farming revolution, but it was a structural reset. To prevent stacking too many multipliers, GGG removed increased item quantity from player gear entirely. The era of IAQ gear, Windreapers, Goldworms, Biscos, Ventors was over. Only rarity remained, however in PoE 1 rarity never influenced currency drops at all, in contrast to PoE 2 where it does. Magic Find was no longer about gear, it was about the right scarabs, the right Atlas tree, the right map strategy. A new age had begun. Threads of consciousness and the final form of juicing. The current league, Mercenaries of Thartus, launched in June 2025 alongside the Secrets of the Atlas expansion, and it introduced a powerful new system, Threads of Consciousness, a chaining mechanic similar to Atlas memories but with stacking map modifiers across map chains. The system produced the most juiced maps in PoE history, unprecedented loot, tons of T0 uniques, high-tier maps and massive currency drops, viable non-MF strategies to reach mirror-tier profit, rewarding T16 maps with T17-like mods also called T16.5 or T16.5. Alongside this, the trend away from Magic Find gear lacking quantity modifiers continued. Now mechanics scale loot drops rather than gear stats. A notable mention, a unique golden flask that offers one of many random buffs, including plus 50% item rarity, but its complexity and cost relegated it to mem tier use. Another example of how raw MF stats are being phased out of the meta. Who knows, maybe players will start using it more and it could become a meta choice in the future. They nerfed the loot, but not the memories. So many echoes of loot, and yet it's not just the drops we remember, it's the journey. 12 years, dozens of leaks, hundreds of mechanics, and countless memories. What a ride! From the first days of simple quantity stacking to the golden era of full juice Delirium maps, and all the way to the fall of Beyond and the rise of Affliction and Mercenaries. The Magic Find meta has evolved like no other. There were leaks we hated, there were leaks we adored, but through every patch, every nerf, every change, GG cooked. And let's be honest, they cooked almost every single leak, even when we complained. This video isn't just a timeline, it's a shout out to the genius of GGG, a tribute to the madness of loot explosions, and a reminder of mechanics that live now only in our memory. Some strategies were broken, some were beautiful, sometimes the game crashed, sometimes our builds did, but what kept us here was never just the loot, it was the spirit of change, the never-ending evolution, the thrill of discovery. Some mechanics vanished, others were reworked, many were nerfed, but none were forgotten. And that's what this video was really about, not just farming currency, but farming memories. And now, with Path of Exile 2 official launch knocking on the door, one question remains. What will happen to Magic Find in PoE 1? Will it fade away, or will it rise once more in some forgotten corner of Recklust? With the removal of item quantity on gear and the limited impact of rarity, Magic Find is no longer what it once was. It is now a supplemental mechanic, not a build-defining one, replaced by map-based, not gear-based farming, dependent on game mechanics more than player IAR or previously the removed IAQ stats. But there's still uncertainty. In Path of Exile 2, item rarity does affect currency drops, unlike in PoE 1. This opens up 3 possibilities. 1. PoE 1 is updated to match PoE 2, reviving MF through rarity to affect currency. 2. PoE 2 is nerfed to match PoE 1, removing rarity's effect on currency. And 3, they diverge, and Magic Find becomes a PoE 2 exclusive concept. Or GGG might surprise us all with something no one expects. Thanks for being part of this journey, and remember, they nerfed the loot, but not the memories. So now I turn it over to you, my fellow exiles. The comments section is yours. What was your favorite league? What strategy gave you the most insane loot explosion and fun? And what's your prediction for the future of PoE 1 in a post-PoE 2 world? Let's talk in the comments. As always, your insights are what keep this channel alive. If you made it this far, wow, thank you. This video was a massive project and took a ton of work. If you enjoyed it, consider dropping a like, subscribing, or leaving a comment. It helps more than you think. And if you'd like to go one step further, I've recently enabled channel support. There's no paywalled content, everything stays free and fair for everyone. But if you'd like to show your appreciation, you can become a supporter with custom emotes and that shiny badge next to your name. Right now, there's actually 0 supporters, so you could be the very first. Every bit helps, especially on videos like this one. Thanks again for watching, you are the real loot. See you in the next map.